Hello. It's always fun to be here. I love Woodstock and I love the whole surrounding area. We're really very wonderfully equipped with everything from flora, fauna, and great people and talent. And from time to time, we like to show that to you. Or at least if you're listening, you'll hear it. It's also broadcasted on Woodstock TV, so there are people that actually are going to look at our logo. But our archives is filled, and you can always come and borrow things and look at the visuals as well. Well, Nathan prepared an interesting show tonight because somebody came in for a visit. And before we let you know more about that, I'm going to tell you the museum is open. We're still here till October 10th, which is Columbus Day. And we're open on weekends, noon to 4, and weekdays by appointment. And we have been setting up appointments. I don't know, there's all these last-minute people coming through and enjoying their tour and their Woodstock experience. And for those of you who haven't been out to our place, it's also a very peaceful place. And this time of year, the garden is coming to a close, but it's filled with pumpkins and still tomatoes to pick and all kinds of parsley and rosemary, and you're welcome because I haven't been back in it. I'm too busy working on the next thing. So, Nathan, if you'd like to tell people a little bit about the show and introduce it.
Oh, just a little bit because the show pretty much speaks for itself. But this guy who came in from Seattle, who used to live in Woodstock during the mid-'60s, and beyond. Actually, he was here in the late 50s too, but he remembers more about me in my 20s than I do, it seems. It's amazing how he fills me in on this stuff, and I can't get enough of it. And you're not going to be bothered with any of that. We're just going to stick to the subject of his life in Woodstock. So it speaks for itself. So let's just roll it. Yes.
Well, we have Eric Greenberg with us here today. He came in from Seattle, Washington, but he is a local yokel and was born around here and raised around here. And we had some adventures together, and we would like to share some of that with you at this very moment. Eric, what do you got to say? What do you remember? Anything?
Well, I'm actually one of those people that actually lived through the 60s and does remember. But prior to that, I was born in Kingston, New York in 1953. My parents moved me around a little bit. One place that they moved me to, the first place I ever actually got a good view of Overlook Mountain was in Ruby, New York. And Overlook was right in my backyard, as far as I could tell. And it was a great place to go to when my dad used to take me on hikes up to the fire tower and things like that. And so one day I got the idea that I wanted to actually dig a tunnel from my backyard that would take me all the way to Overlook Mountain. It happened to the fact that it snowed the night before and the ground was completely frozen. However, that wasn't going to stop me. So I took out a snow shovel and I jumped on it as hard as I could, got through the first layer of snow, hit the frozen ground, and broke the snow shovel. So I realized that it was going to take a little bit more work than I had intended.
Yeah.
So I thought I'd put it off for a little while. And I knew that this might take some money as well. And I figured that I'm not going to run into much money, so this is going to be an idea that I was going to kind of put on the side. I was about 4 years old at the time. And time went on, and we moved to Lake Etrine, and then from Lake Etrine we moved to Kingston. And then my parents, I guess they weren't getting along too well. And they broke up, and I moved with my father in 1962 to Woodstock.
And you were how old then?
I was 9 years old. And one of the favorite places that he used to like to go was the Cafe Espresso. And I still remember my first times going there, all the red and white checkers on the tablecloths. And our favorite meal was manicotti that Bernard Patrial used to make. He was the cook there, and they had a huge cafe, espresso, a big espresso machine that sounded like a train when it was working right. And Sonia Malkeen, a longtime Woodstock resident that had at times babysat for me when I lived in Lake Etrine, back when I was 2 or 3 years old, was one of the waitresses there, and she was also in charge of the music there. And she'd bring in luminaries like Humza Eldin and Tom Paxton. Really interesting, you know. And Tom Paxton used to have my sister, when she was visiting, sit on his lap, and he'd sing Little Boxes. And they would have theater groups there. The Woodstock Performing Arts got its start there. My dad actually got to be in a play. It was like a 2-person play called The Lesson. And we're in The Lesson.
UNESCO.
You know the play?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, in The Lesson, he got to play the professor, and there was a student he couldn't quite get through to. And he kept getting angrier and angrier with her until actually at the end of the play he murders her. And every once in a while he'd forget a word, but I had them all memorized. And I sat right in the front, and he would look at me and I'd prompt him. And that worked out pretty well for him. Well, as time went on, I'd say late 63, early 64, yeah, or even late 62, early 63 going into 64, in the winter, he took on a friend that was a guy. He was about 10 years older than me, you know, but I still thought of him kind of like as a kid, but he was older than me, and he liked to hammer out on piano and stuff like that, and they used to argue a lot, my father and him. And what they would do basically is wait for me to show up. I'd give them, they said, so what are we going to talk about tonight? And I don't know, I'm like 10 years old. What are you going to talk about tonight? Why don't you talk about politics? What's happening with politics? It was, at that time, John Fitzgerald Kennedy. Kennedy was president. And so they said, okay. And so they start talking, and they go on and on and on. And after a while, there was maybe something I had to say, and I'd go, hey, you know, I go, shut up, kid. They look at me. I go, wait a second. I started the conversation. Well, okay, so that's the way it went. And people started calling me kid. And I was the kid that ran around the espresso. And I used to play chess with people and stuff like that. And I was pretty good at chess. And used to beat this guy my dad used to argue with all the time. You know, that was pretty good to make me feel like...
What was his name?
Well, I didn't know at that time what his name was. But one day, they were looking through a magazine, you see, and I think it was a thing of Look or Life magazine, and there was this big centerfold, a picture of a guy. And they put it out on the table, and they're arguing with each other, you know, and he looks at my dad looks at me, and he says, Eric, do you see this guy anywhere in the room? And I look at the picture, I look over, and I look at my father, I look at this guy, I look all around the room, no, you know, and I see him hand my dad a $10 bill, and back then that was like a 50. And I'm going, whoa. What's that for? He says, well, you see this guy here? That's him in the picture. I said, that's him in the picture? I'm thinking, man, this guy's got to be rich. No one that famous could be sitting around me and be in this kind of magazine. Anyone in this magazine is rich if they make a big picture like that out of them. And I'm thinking, maybe this is the guy that's going to pay for my tunnel. That's what I started thinking to myself, you know. But I keep it to myself. I said, well, who are you? He said, well, I only knew him as Bobby. But that was Bob Dylan. And the argument was, now, the rest of his life, being that he's now in Life magazine, he's never going to have privacy again. His privacy is blown, and he's never going to have anonymity. You know, he won't be able to walk around and be himself, you know, except maybe in Woodstock, who knows. But at any rate, that was that scope of that conversation. And I said, wow, so you're a musician. And, you know, I never even realized you could make money at being a musician. I just thought people played music for fun, you know. So about a week or so later, I get up the nerve. And I walk up to Bobby, and I said, look, I got to ask you something in private. So we walk into the corner of the room, and he says, what, is this private enough? I said, no, not really. And we walk into the further corner of the room, and he says, is this private? And I says, I guess so. He says, well, what is it that you'd like to ask me? I said, would you like to have a partner? And I looked at him, you know, he looked at me, he says, well, what would you help me with? What could you do for me? And without asking him about the tunnel or anything, I said, well, I have an idea about how you could spend your money. And I didn't think it was physically possible. But the guy turned blue, and then he turned green, and he turned several other colors and facial expressions that I really don't want to get into right now, especially on the radio, and stomped out of the room. And everyone looked at me and said, "What did you say to Bobby, kid?" I said, "I didn't say nothing." "You sure you didn't say nothing to Bobby, kid?" I said, "No, I didn't say nothing." And a week or so goes by. "What did you say to Bobby, kid?" I didn't say nothing. He hadn't come back in the espresso for a couple weeks. One day I'm walking with my school books past the village green, and this old Hudson pulls up with suicide doors, and the door swings open, and it's Dylan. He looks at me and he goes, "Get in, kid." Well, I knew him. Normally I wouldn't hop in a car with a stranger, but I knew the guy. So I hop in, and he takes me driving all around through the mountains and stuff like that, telling me how I have to go to school, and I have to join the system and make my own money and do everything on my own. I think this is right around when he wrote, "I Ain't Gonna Work on Maggie's Farm No More." Right, all the protest songs and everything else. But here he is telling me how I have to be part of the system and never ask anybody else for any help on anything and make all my money myself. And I kept trying to say, but, he says, "No buts, kid." I mean, I was trying to tell him my story about why I really asked him. But I never actually got a chance to tell him about my tunnel that I wanted to build to go to Overlook Mountain. And he lets me back out of the car, back on the village green, and I walk home. And every time I saw either him or any guy from the band, like Rick, Danko, or Levon, or Garth, or any of the guys from the band, they'd stop the car, roll down their window, and say, "Hey, kid." They all called me kid. "Come on over here. Come here." I said, "Yes, what can I do for you?" He said, "How you doing in school, kid?" He had told every one of the people that he worked with to always, if they ever saw me, to ask me how I was doing in school. And that's one of my Dylan stories. You know, if you'd like to know anything more about old-time Woodstock, there are some really good stories I could tell you about the Cafe Espresso itself. I remember, and here's another Dylan story. Now I'm thinking about it. I remember one time it was really snowing and everything. I think it was just the beginning of the winter of '64, and we were experiencing a blizzard. And I'm sitting on right in by where the fire pit is, in the middle of the espresso. They had this big round fireplace, and the door flies open. It's one of these doors that you walk in the first door and shut it behind you, then you walk in the second door so the wind doesn't blow in, right? And so the door flies open on the inside door, and Dylan comes kind of stumbling in, and behind him is a pair of car keys that comes right behind him and slaps him right into the back of the head, just like that. And I made everyone turn around. And behind those car keys was this woman with this long jet black hair matted all over her face, angrier than, she looked like the Cruella de Vil or something. And she was in behind him, and she was in high heels, and she said, "Never again." And he said, I'm sorry. He had driven a pickup truck down Ohio Mountain from where he was living at the time, and it had run out of gas, and they had to walk the last mile through the blizzard to the espresso. And with that saying, and us realizing that's what had happened, the shoes started coming off of her feet and hitting him in the back of the head. She was a great shot. And that was the first time I had ever met Joan Baez. And that was kind of interesting story. During that time, she was actually recording Volume 5, which she highlighted Dylan in terms of copying him. And because of this Volume 5, he actually got a lot more notoriety than he would maybe have normally gotten. And she even imitated him on a couple of her songs, which is really good. Now, she wasn't quite sure the order of songs that were supposed to go on to Volume 5. So, knowing that my dad was a radio announcer, she thought maybe he could help her. So they went upstairs at the espresso, where Bobby had written some of his music, and it was quiet. And she didn't have her guitar or nothing with her, but she hummed the melodies and gave him an idea of some of the words, and together they worked out the song lyrics in terms of the order of tunes that was going to be on Volume 5. And on my birthday, September 28th, 1964, we get in the mail signed copies of the last test pressing of Joan Baez 5, with little notations of why it was rejected, too much fret sounds and things like that, which I still have the test pressing. And it's probably the best recording ever that no one's heard of Joan Baez, because you got to hear all the fret sounds, which is something that we really covet today. But it wasn't kosher then to do. But I remember one night, not only her, but her sister Mimi, and Maria Muldaur and Jeff Muldaur, both very young Maria, and a very young John Sebastian, along with our own Billy Fair, who was brought up in Woodstock, had moved up from the city when he was a teenager. Dave Van Ronk and Ramblin' Jack Elliott, and a host of other people. And if I can remember any more names, I'll drop them as I can. I think John Hammond was one of them. They were sitting in the side patio of the Cafe Espresso, and they decided to have a hoot and start singing acoustically. And so my dad looked at me and he says, listen, I want you to sit here at this table and look on over at that table where they're singing, and listen very carefully, because you're never going to hear this again. And so I did, and it was beautiful. And they sang song after song after song, each person trading off, and the two girls, Joni and her sister doing harmonies, and Dylan singing, and John Hammond singing, and oh my God, it was just beautiful. And you could hear a pin drop in between. But I turned around, and not only were there people in every table around me, but there was no standing room on the patio. And as I looked beyond the patio, there was no traffic going across Tinker Street. It was blocked. And there was people all the way back across the street to the old Forge House. And there were actually people sitting on the top of the porch roof of the old Forge House listening. And that went on all night long. Wow. So that's a pretty cherished memory. A few cherished memories that I've had of Woodstock.
Around 1964 or something?
That was it was 1964, summer of 64.
Yeah.
Yeah, right when the patio got built.
Mm-hmm. So these guys were hanging out at the Espresso. Did a lot of these people play often at the Espresso, or did they get on stage usually, or they just kind of
The Espresso
around?
didn't have a stage. It had a piano off to the side, which every once in a while Bobby would get up and he'd hammer something out on it. But then it would have where tables were against the back wall, and when the performing arts played, they used to set up a stage. But other than that, they just clear an area, and generally they wouldn't even have a microphone or anything. People would just be quiet, and folks would sing and you'd hear them. Just kind of like acoustic.
And this was all no charge to get in.
No charge to get in.
Right.
Nothing like that. It was all improv. And on top of that, you'd never know who you would get. Because sometimes people would come in from out of state. Johnny Cash came one night, We'd have people come in from all over the place. They were all connections. See, they all came from a scene that was going on in the Village in the late 50s and early 60s. And once Bobby came up, Albert Grossman came up, managing Bobby. He started inviting other musicians up. And of course, Sonia was inviting musicians up. And as the Espresso was the only venue that was in town, the Seahorse had closed. And it was which was another venue that was happening in the 50s and the late 40s. But in the late 50s, when it was the Nook, and then the early 60s when Mary Lou and Bernard took it over, it became the Espresso from the Nook. It used to be the Nook, and when it was the Nook, actually Pan Copeland from Pan's Delicatessen, she owned it. And Pan, we did festivals out in her farm. Well, finally I'm hanging out with all my friends over on Pan's porch. And some guy who looked like a Wild Bill Hickok gets out of a van, and he's got these fringed boots on, and hat and ponytail and fringed jacket, right from like the Wild West. And he says, any of you kids want work for the summer? I knew I did, and a couple of other of us did, so we hopped in his van, and me and George Quinn and Arthur Smith and Danny Wells, I believe, hopped in the van, and we went up to Pan's farm. And they said, we're going to have a music festival here in Labor Day. But we've got 2 months or whatever to get this place ready. And all it was chicken coops filled with chicken dung and everything from 50 years of being used and never cleaned out. We had to clean out the chicken coops and the longhouse and mow the field and get everything ready for this big festival that was going to happen at the end of the summer. And so I worked the whole summer doing that. And one by one, being that they weren't being paid, each kid that we started with quit. And I was the last holdout. And come the time that we were going to have the show, there was no stage that had been built yet. And it was the day before, and musicians started showing up, one after the other, when we were putting them up in the longhouse. And it's getting dark, and there's no stage. And Buddy Seif goes down by where the stage is supposed to be. He's got these plans drawn up, and Jocko's down there. And Jocko says, listen, Eric, I want you to go up to the longhouse, and all the musicians that were there, you have Major Wiley, and who else? There were quite a few bands that played the first one. You had Tim Hardin, but he didn't have to stay there because he was living in the area at the time. Richie Havens, Billy Batson. There was quite a few people in the longhouse at the time. And I said, look, you've heard of be-ins, you've heard of sit-ins, everything, this, that, and the other thing. Tonight, we're going to have a build-in. And they're looking to say, what's a build-in? I said, well, basically, if you want to play tomorrow night, you're going to have to build the stage. So really, at the first Woodstock Festival, Cyril Castor was there. First Woodstock Festival, they built their own stage that they played on. And they all...
You told them? You're the one that told them they had to build
Jocko
the stage?
set me up.
Yeah.
Yeah, he always had me do the dirty work.
He told you had to go get them to come down and build the stage?
Yeah, he didn't have the nerve to do it himself.
And how old were you, like 14?
13.
Yeah.
I hadn't turned 14 yet.
Uh-huh.
So I get up there and I come down and they followed me down. They actually did. And there was wood there and everything all set up. And before you knew it, the frame of the stage was being built, and there was 4 watermelons that showed up, and 3 gallons of wine, and other sacrament showed up, and there was this big frame that we were building. We were stretching plastic over. It was going to be for the light show. But we were worried that the wind was going to pick up and blow it over, so we all volunteered to light up cigarettes and burn little holes in it. And we burned holes and all evenly over the whole surface of the thing and stood it up. It was a huge diamond that it made, a backdrop for a light show on the back of the stage. I had never seen a light show before, so I was really interested to see how that was going to turn out. And got the thing built, and the next day people actually started showing up. And the show started, and we built we helped, I think it was Joshua Lights that did they came down from Albany. I think it was Joshua. It might have been Pablo, so don't hold me to that. But they did a wet show, which was over they had an overhead projector, and they used oils in different colors, and they moved their hands up and down on the light projection thing, and it made all these great color schemes on the screen. And I remember it really got going. This group called the Group Image came up and started playing, and their theme was The Group Image Sucks. And what they were was the offshoot of Incredible, the ELO, the Electric Light Theater. They were part of that.
Electric Light Orchestra?
Orchestra, I mean, yeah, ELO, yeah.
What do you mean offshoot? They were
they were part of it. They were part of it, but they were the Group Image part of it. Mm-hmm. Okay?
Okay.
And the same lead singers and everything else. I can't drop names because I don't remember them anymore. But they came on, and the lights got really intense, and it was just incredible. And then Richie Havens comes on, and he's singing High Flying Bird. And I'm walking up towards the campfires up by where Dave Boyle is having his fish fry. And the fires are going way up high. I mean, it's incredible. And he's all worried that his fish are going to burn. And Dylan is talking to him. And I hadn't seen Dylan in about 3 years. And I looked at him, and I didn't know what he was up to. So I looked at him, I'm 13. I said, are you still Bob Dylan? And Dave, he forgot all about his fish. He just almost ended up rolling on the ground laughing. And he says, "What?" Dylan looks at me and goes, "Yeah, I'm still Bob Dylan." Okay, good. So anyway, they're talking a little bit, and I said, "Look, you want to go down? I'll find you a camp spot." So that was my job, was to make sure everyone had their campsites and it was safe, and they were burning the wood responsibly and that sort of thing. So I said, "No, wait here." And I went down to a campsite that was right in front of the stage. I said, "Look, someone wants to share your camp with you." He said, "Oh, we worked really hard to get this all set up." I said, "Well, this is Bob Dylan. Would you mind sharing your campsite with Bob Dylan?" I said, "Oh, man, you're kidding me." They're going, "Yeah, right, Bob Dylan, and I'm the king of Sheba," or whatever, And so, "No, it was really Bob Dylan." So he says, "Okay, yeah, sure. If it's really Bob Dylan, sure, he can share our site with us." So I walk him down, plop him down, and they're on their jaws are like, yeah. Right? Anyway, so he's enjoying the show. But it started to snow. And Havens is still singing this, the high-flying bird song. And it's starting to snow, and it's Labor Day. And the fires are getting taller and higher. It's like no one can explain it, but all of a sudden the strobe lights come on. And you don't put strobe lights on for Richie Havens, right? But we look up in the sky, and there's just like lights in the sky that are flashing on and off, like UFOs. And my dad's recording the whole thing. So I said, "I can't wait to hear this on tape," right? But I'm saying something's wrong. So I walked behind. I told Dylan and the other guys, I'm going to check this out. And I walked behind the stage. And there's Jocko behind the stage. And he's got every fuse out of the fuse box. And he's got them juggling around in his hands. And he's going, "There's no electricity going to the stage, man. There's no juice flowing to the stage, man. But the lights were on. The sound was on. Everything was going." I said, "Jocko, put the fuses back in. So when everything gets back to normal, we have electricity." He went, "Right."
Was he tripping or something?
He wasn't tripping. Everyone saw it. Everyone saw it. And
So
you
it was
can ask,
UFOs or something?
Yeah. At the first one.
What was this called? Wasn't it called the Sound Out?
It's called Sound Out.
And
Yeah, it
you
was our
think you
first. It was our
attracted-
first. It was
yeah.
our first festival of that type, rock festival. Because before that, we had done festivals, but they were Maverick festivals. There were festivals from the 20s, this, that, and the other thing. But this was the first electric rock and roll festival.
Don't you think there was another fuse box somewhere? I mean,
You know, Nathan, your guess is as good as mine. I'm going to go with the fact that I'm just going to go with. I'm not going to even answer the
I
story.
mean, the light show, they weren't plugged into the same thing as the stage
They
was.
were. They all got their source from the main power that came out of the stage. It was a big snake, and my dad was recording the whole thing.
Yeah.
Okay, and his recording was still rolling, and so I said, "Heck with it." We left it alone. And anyway, the show wrapped up for that night, and I slept by the stage for security. They kept me as a 13-year-old kid sleeping by the stage overnight as security. And the next day, everyone starts showing back up, and I said, "So what happened last night?" No one wanted to really talk about it. No one knew really what happened. And my dad showed up. I said, "Dad, how did the recording come out?" He said, "I listened to it." I said, "Well, what did it sound like?" It sounded like white noise. It didn't record. It just went shh through the whole thing. I didn't get to record Richie. And that was the first festival that we did prior to Woodstock. That's how it got kicked off. That was kind of like the pebble that dropped into the pond and the ripples that came coming out. Okay.
Your dad has, by the way, I was just thinking, your dad did make some decent recordings of Richie. One playing a couple of piano tunes, which he really did.
Yeah.
And another,
He showed up at a few concerts,
Yeah.
like at Bel Air and things like that.
Yeah.
And had the opportunity to record him then. But those recordings from '67 somehow got lost in a flood and went down a stream under Jocko's house somewhere and were lost forever.
Do you have any idea why Bob Dylan didn't play at the Sound Outs? Was he under some kind of agreement or something, do you think?
I have no idea.
You don't know. Okay.
He just came down. He enjoyed the show. He really enjoyed the show.
He camped out, huh?
He didn't camp out, but he sat by the campfires. And I didn't see him after I walked behind. After I went behind the stage to see Jocko, I didn't see Dylan again that night. Yeah.
When did you see him again?
When did I see Dylan again after that? Trying to remember.
Whatever.
A couple times in Hobby Glop. Later when he had his kid and he was with Sarah. He came in and he let me hold his kid. I forget which one. which one of his children it was, but I got to hold his kid and chum with him a little bit and ask him how his chess game was, you know, stuff like that.
Was he living at the Espresso for a while? I mean,
When he first moved to town, he lived above the Espresso.
Right.
And he wrote some of the lyrics to Highway 61 there, and also on Other Side of Bob Dylan.
And Blonde on Blonde, no?
I'm not sure about that, but I do know Another Side of Bob Dylan, and the reason I know that is because he has, on the back of one of his albums, he had a thing that was called Other Songs, or Writings, or something like that, and part of it was about a kid that was munching on a sandwich, and looked at him and says, you know, I'm going to beat you. And Dylan looked at the kid and said, in the story is, how do you know that? Why would you say that? He says, well, I can. I'm going to beat you. And he said, well, you better beat me. And the kid looked at him and said, well, why must I better beat you? He says, because I've never beaten anybody before. And the story goes, well, the kid locked his jaw and went, no, I've got to beat you. That was me.
Yeah.
That was me.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. But now we're segueing back to Cafe Espresso 1964.
Yeah, I know. I hear he wrote a song to Mary Lou Patcherell about her, but I don't know which one it is.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I couldn't
Any
help
other
you with
stories
that.
about him at the Espresso that you can think of offhand?
None that pop out.
All right, so back to the sound outs. So that first festival was in
67.
67.
Yeah, Labor Day weekend.
2 years. Was Michael Lang? Did you meet him?
No,
at
he
that
didn't
point?
come. He didn't come until the next year when we did it again, and this time it wasn't Jocko doing it. It was called Sound Festival.
Really?
Okay, and it was Julius, and I don't know Julius's last name, and his sidekick Putnam were producing it that year. And around about the second night, I think Cat Mother was on stage. They were the first band to come to town that actually used a hearse as an equipment vehicle, which was kind of cool, but it freaked out some of the farmers, especially when they used to drive the hearse onto some of the farmers' lands to get their eggs and stuff. You know, they see the hearse come down, driving down there. They're going, who are they coming for, you know? And it was this band, you know, coming down, Cat Mother and the All Night Newsboys. They were living in Pan's haunted house.
Oh, yeah.
That was adjacent to the field. And they were playing, and I see this curly-haired guy with this big smile on his face come bouncing down by the stage, and he's talking for the longest time to Julius. And then they get together, and they go back up to the office. So I've seen him there talking to them, and it was interesting. It was really interesting. And after that festival, I could go into some stories about that particular festival, but I won't. Julius and I, afterwards, it's fall, it's beautiful fall colors, and we decide we're going to bushwhack our way up, which means not walking on the trail, but through the woods, up Overlook Mountain. And we get to a point in the trail, beautiful colors and everything, where we hit the actual road, the logging road, the ranger road, and there's this big rock. We sit there and we hang out for a while, and we're thirsty. And there's this creek that's running down just below that rock. And we went down, and Julius looked at me and he said, you know, one day they're going to be bottling water and selling it. And I said, that's bullshit. They're going to, excuse my language, but you can't sell water like that. You can't bottle it and sell. He said, I bet they will. And we had the longest drink of this fresh, beautiful, cold mountain water, right? And then he looked at me and he says, I want you to see something. And he reached on the ground and he picked up a pebble and he dropped it into the pool. And like I was saying earlier, the rings of water came out. And he says, do you remember the festival that we did? And the festival that you worked on with Jocko? He said, that was like a drop in the water. Something really big is about to come out of this. And I said, how do you know? He says, you know that curly-haired guy that I talked to? I said, yeah. They're going to have a big festival. And it's going to have every big band in the world come play there. I said, really? I said, yeah. And we continued our walk up the mountain. And I remember later that summer I went with my family to Block Island in Rhode Island. And they said, where are you from? And I said, I'm from Woodstock. I said, well, what's Woodstock? I said, you're going to find out what Woodstock is. you're going to find out. And this was in 68, late 68. You'll find out what Woodstock is. And sure enough, come 69, with the big festival, we became probably the most famous little town in the entire world.
Yeah. Yeah, all Michael Lang did was he expanded the concept of the sound outs where you had one band after another and you can camp out on the land 1,000 times. So instead of, I hear there was 3,000 or 4,000 people. Maybe that's an exaggeration of the sound outs.
The first sound out was larger than that. It was about 5,000, 6,000.
Okay, so
I know that because
expanded
I know how much. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
He just expanded the idea 1,000 times, and that was
He did
Woodstock.
expand. He did expand it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we were in by where the guy was taking the tickets, and I was helping park cars,
Yeah.
and we had about over 1,200 cars show up, and people came lots of other different ways. But we filled up like 4 or 5 areas that we had to find emergency parking for other people during the sound outs. So I know there was 5,000 people at one of them.
2 sound outs in
We
60?
we did one sound out in 67.
Right.
We did 2 sound festivals in 68. One of them was at Pan's Field. And the other was done by Cyril Castor, and it was at the Woodstock Playhouse. And then the big one happened. Then after that, they started doing mini sound outs. No big festivals again until Ian, I can't remember Ian's last name, in 71. Did one called Sound Festival, and he got arrested. And we had, it was, who played there? Larry Coryell and the Flying Burrito Brothers was at the last one, and they were arrested by the Socrates police for having more than 300 people on the field.
Yeah.
And that's how that one went. I'm sorry I interrupted you before.
it's all right.
Yeah.
Just taking notes here. Yeah, very interesting. I don't have to ask a lot of questions, but once in a while I like to throw anyone. That thing about Michael Lang expanding it 1,000 times is quite a concept.
Yeah,
and I know that he was once at a party up at Bird Cliff at Mary Orser's house.
Oh, yeah?
There were all these psychedelic artists that lived up there on Bird Cliff and right across from where Dylan lived. And Michael Lang, right around that time, came to one of those parties. And
did he?
he was, I don't know if he was boasting, but he was telling everyone, this young 22-year-old guy is saying, "Oh, I'm going to put on the biggest rock festival ever in all history.
He did.
And all the big bands are coming."
He did.
And Mary Orser told me that she just kind of tapped him on the shoulder, said, "Yeah, Michael, just keep it up, And they didn't believe him, but
good energy,
said,
huh?
He's really determined. This kid, maybe he will get somewhere."
Well, later on that spring of the next year, I get a call. Not a call. I meet what's his name? He was the drummer for Fear Itself, Bill McCord. Okay, and him and I used to. He used to buy 3 Musketeers and split them with me because I never had any money.
Did you get 2?
He'd just buy one and we'd split
there's
it.
3 sections into 3.
Well, no, back then it was
right
just
in
one
half?
big bar,
Oh,
3
yeah.
Musketeer.
Oh, okay.
And we'd
It's one bar.
split a 3 Musketeer.
Forget it. Yeah, go on.
And
Yeah.
he looked at me and said, "I heard it's happening." I said, "What's happening?" He said, "The festival's on. It's on." I said, "How do you know it's on?" He said, "I got a call from Julius earlier today, and the festival's on. And the town could do nothing that whole summer but talk about the festival coming."
The big one.
Yeah, the big one.
But they wanted to do it in the town. Michael Lang looked all over the place and
Yeah.
couldn't quite find. And the town wasn't really too excited about having all these dopers and rockers and all that come, even living here. And they were kind of getting nervous, the art colony, about all this. And I think it was starting to attract a lot more people than ever before. The town, the rock, the music. No.
Well,
Was it becoming more of an a tourist scene?
it's always been an art colony.
Yeah.
Okay, been an art colony since the early, the late
1902.
and before it was it was all the watercolorists during the 1880s. The Hudson River
they
School.
They were
Yeah,
oil painters,
yeah.
and they were not just Woodstock. They were
Yeah.
more all over the place.
But Overlook was the most painted
oh yeah,
of any mountain in the Catskills at that time.
right.
Okay, so it had a long history that went back well over 150 years.
Right.
For the arts. But getting back to when people started coming because it was an attraction. It always was a place where weirdos were, where hippies were, kind
Or
of.
bohemians.
Bohemians where oddballs were.
Artists.
Yeah,
Right.
artists. But when I moved to
Right.
Woodstock in '62, the folk music was like Tom Dooley and this,
Yeah.
that, and the other thing. It
Hang
was
down
very,
your head,
yeah,
Tom
it's very
Dooley.
traditional.
Yeah.
And then of course Dylan did the Newport thing and blew everyone out of the water with Going Electric.
Yeah, but they booed him off the stage.
They did
with
boo him off the
band.
stage, and then they invited him back to do it
Yeah.
again the next year.
Oh, yeah, with the band?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't
don't
remember,
think
but
so.
I know that they did want him to come back after
Yeah.
that.
Do you know why they booed him off the stage?
Because he went non-acoustic, because he
Right.
went electric.
And they thought, you know what? Here's my theory. As far as I know, they were all yelling, this is distorted. We can't understand the words. It's electronic and it's, and I don't think they knew how to tweak the system because I don't think the band was distorted or too loud. They made wonderful harmonies. They, if you know how to tweak that system, these folkies didn't know how to do rock or blues or funk or whatever. So, Pete wanted to pull the plug, but I never knew him to be angry about anything.
You say Pete Seeger wanted to pull the plug?
Yeah. Yeah, that's what they say. And I knew Pete real well. He, if he was angry, as far as I ever saw, he would go and write a song to make social change. He would bring "We Shall Overcome" to the civil rights movement down south, and that became their anthem, or things like that. But I never saw him show anger, But for some reason or other, that thing wasn't tweaked right, and it didn't sound right at that.
There was a
festival.
stage manager, and I can't remember his name, that tried to play the peacemaker between him and maybe it was Seeger and maybe the audience, that allowed Dylan to finish their set. At least they got to finish their set.
Yeah, I don't know if they did or not, but
I
good
think
to
they
tune
did.
in on that, yeah.
But at any
He
rate,
got booed off the stage, from what I heard.
okay, well, we can Google it.
And then Dylan supposedly came back on, and sang a couple of folk tunes.
Yes, he did. And then he also did the memorial to Woody Guthrie. And that was acoustic. But it was,
at that festival?
no, that was
another
Carnegie Hall.
Yeah, right.
And I think it was after that. I think Carnegie Hall was after Newport when Woody died.
Yeah, probably was.
I'm not sure about the chronology there.
But Dylan and a lot of the folk singers were getting so big, they were kind of too big for the little coffee houses down the city anymore, some of them.
He wanted to charge $15,000 to play Woodstock.
Oh,
And
yeah.
it was one of the reasons
Well, that
they
would have been
couldn't.
a little more than
they
Hendrix got.
They couldn't afford it or something. But he was also slated to play the Isle of Wight.
He did play that.
And I heard that he was really angry about that set that he did at the Isle of Wight because he had to take a leak. Something about him having to take a leak. This is rumor,
Well,
but
yeah.
I got it from a pretty good source. He had to take a leak, and they wouldn't let him take a break in the middle of his set to take a leak, and he was kind of pretty pissed about that.
Oh, yeah. Well, there are a few things
no
that bothered
pun
him
intended. Yeah.
about he had to go on real late on it, waited
Yes.
on and on. But
But
this
the
was
band
his
did
first-
play at Woodstock. The band
The
did.
band played at Woodstock,
Yeah.
yeah. But the Isle of Wight, I think that was Dylan's first gig after the motorcycle accident. What do you know about that? Do you know anything about that?
I heard that there was an accident. It was right in front of Buckman's.
Do you know when that happened?
It was 65,
Yeah?
65, 66.
Yeah.
66
More
probably.
like 66 maybe, huh?
Yeah, 66. Because in 67 he had recovered, and I saw him again. So it was 66. He fell off the back of the bike.
Oh. Someone else was driving?
I believe so.
Oh, yeah?
And he hurt his back,
Yeah.
and it took him a long time to recover.
Yeah.
But that's all. That was hearsay because I didn't see it happen.
Because I heard he probably wasn't quite ready to play Woodstock, and he was humoring them up to like 5 or 6 days before the festival. They said, "Come on, we go to Woodstock." It's
I know. It
'cause
was
of
when
you,
he was
man.
laying down. It was when he was laying down the basement tapes at Big Pink.
Yeah.
That whole summer. That was the summer of
Right,
'67.
which was in Saugerties, by the
Yeah.
way.
Yeah. West Saugerties.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
After I don't know exactly when they moved to Big Pink, but I know that Albert picked up the band when Dylan brought them in, and and that they moved into this little track house in Saugerties. I guess they didn't have a lot of bucks then; they were just getting going, and that's where they called it Big Pink because it's still pink, and
Right.
and they recorded the greatest album that they ever did, the
Right.
music at Big Pink, and Dylan
Yes.
did the basement tapes
Yeah,
there.
yep,
which was
stage,
a
yep, Big
thing.
Pink. And just a little segue on that, Albert Grossman not only managed Dylan and the band, but he managed the Byrds. He managed Janis Joplin. I'm gonna miss a few here, but John Sebastian he managed.
Mm-hmm.
He managed a lot of acts, including Todd Rundgren.
Right.
And
Odetta.
Odetta.
Yeah. Todd Rundgren later, yeah.
Yeah, and
How about Hendrix? I mean, he brought Hendrix in.
No,
Hendrix
Michael
came to
Jeffries.
town. Why
Michael
did
Jeffries. Michael Jeffries managed Hendrix.
But is he from Woodstock too, or something?
Michael Jeffries? No,
Yeah.
he was some guy. Not as much respect for Michael Jeffries as some people would like to have.
Yeah.
But
Because
when
what I was getting at was that Hendrix came to Woodstock right around the time that Joplin was here,
yes,
and he is.
yeah, they
from what
both
I
came in.
understand,
Actually, they both came into the Elephant Cafe.
after Monterey Pop.
Yeah.
Grossman went up and picked him up, as far as I understood it.
Oh, okay.
And
but
Hendrix
no,
wrote the Star Spangled Banner at the Tinker Street Theater, is what I heard.
okay, maybe you heard that. I didn't hear that.
Yeah.
But I will tell you this.
Okay.
Okay, here's a little bit of an extended
The
story.
rumors, folks. Yeah.
But this is actually a true story, that after the festival, every musician that was anybody would come to Woodstock to play one of 3 or 4 stages, or all of them, being the Cafe Espresso, the Sled Hill Cafe, the Joyous Lake, or the Elephant Cafe. Now, the Elephant was the first place I learned how to do sound work, and that was kind of like my home. Away from home was the Elephant Cafe. And one day after the show, after the festival, I was at the Elephant, because the Elephant opened actually before the Woodstock Festival, and I was doing stage managing. And who walked in first was the Incredible String Band. And there was a ping pong table out back, and I was pretty good at it, and Dean Schomback was the best. No one could return Dean's serve. As a matter of fact, Dean once told me I could be with his girlfriend if I wanted to, if I could return his serve. And I tried time after time after time to return that serve, and he never let me do it. But at any rate, that's another story. But Michael from the Incredible String Band and I played ping pong, and he was pretty good and beat me. And then Janis Joplin shows up. And what's there to do with Janis but play ping pong? And she was just laughing and sloppy about it, and everything. But we managed to have a couple good volleys. And then Jimmy shows up, Hendrix shows up, and he's got these long, lanky arms. And when he wrapped his hand, when he shook my hand, it's like his hand just wrapped completely around my hand. And he had his white guitar that he played at Woodstock with him. And I said, "Can I see that?" And he flops it in my lap. And it's strung backwards. And I tried to play it, and I said, "Who strung this guitar?" Because he's a lefty. And he said, "I did." And I said, "Oh, okay." And so I gave it back to him, of course. But I actually had his guitar in my lap. I thought that was pretty cool. Anyway, as the day went on, they jammed a little on the stage, and I got to do sound for them. And that was a whole lot of fun to do. But it turned out that who was managing Hendrix at the time was Michael Jeffries. Now, Jeffries was kind of a shady kind of character. He was kind of a little bit of mafioso about him. And a friend of mine, actually a friend of Bob Brannan's, and Bob Brannan's friend was my friend, and told Bob, his name was John Andriadakis, that he had overheard Michael Jeffries saying that Jimmy was worth more dead than alive. And he was talking to that story specifically to some of his cronies, some of his friends up at his estate in Lower Burcliffe. And when in fact Hendrix did die
Who
of
had
an
the estate in Lower Burcliffe?
Michael Jeffries.
Okay, yeah.
And when in fact Hendrix did pass away of an overdose, I guess it was in France, later on that year, Michael Jeffries had a party. And it was a huge party, and he invited the whole town. And we sang to Jimmy all night long, and I was of the complete belief that that Michael Jeffries had something to do with it, had a hand in it. Because he was festive, he was happy about it. And
Well, he was the manager, so he probably got some contractual benefits.
he ended up owning all of his rights and
Right,
everything.
wow.
And years later, in Seattle, his brother was doing a show, Leon, and I got to talk to
Hendrix'
Leon.
brother.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got to talk to Leon, and I said, "How did you like Michael Jeffries?" And we shared that story with each other, and he said he was aware of that too. But that was kind of sad to lose Jimmy that way. He was one of the warmest, nicest, most sociable people that you can imagine.
Right.
You know, and my God, if he had just same thing with Janis. Could you imagine their legacy? You know, they say they peaked when they were good, and that was it. We got the best out of them. That we would never have gotten any better. I don't know. It remains to be seen. Yeah. But that's when Woodstock started getting touristy. And people started coming up just to see luminaries, to see who they might run into.
Not until the late 60s?
Yeah, until late 60s, after the festival.
After the festival.
Yeah, that's when we formed family. With Gail Varsi, started family, first across from the Grand Union. She started a little office for family. And then in the Long-Ear building we had it. And we used to meet in Five Rock City Road, John Rhodes, and Bob Reynolds, and Gail Varsi, and a bunch of people, including myself, would sit in circles, and we talk about how we could develop a family, you know, to take care of people now that we're going to be coming into town with no place to go, kids basically, runaways, looking to live a utopian lifestyle, and yet obviously with no one to take care of them. So we've set up a safety net.
So all this time, hold that thought, maybe you have more to say about that, but all that time when all the folk singers were hanging out in the earlier 60s and the rockers started moving into town, it still wasn't attracting a lot of tourists. There's still a place where they could just kind of hang out and be comfortable and not be bothered by...
That was the whole reason they came.
Yeah,
because
right.
It wasn't a lot of tourists and a lot of gawkers.
And that lasted all the way through till the festival?
Yeah, it lasted all the way through until after the festival.
Mm-hmm.
And then it changed. Then the town transitioned. And it became a lot of like what you see now.
Is that when Bob Dylan moved up to Birdcliff?
It was when he moved up to Birdcliff, and people would just go up to Birdcliff and start knocking on his door.
Right.
And that thing that I was talking about with Life magazine that spread that was a self-fulfilling prophecy at that point.
Yeah, we have pictures that on the door in the museum where you see Dylan kind of hiding behind a bush up at Birdcliff. Elliot staged that with him, and one hiding behind the edge of his house.
Elliot Landy, yeah.
Yeah. Well, Elliot had access to Dylan. Did a lot of photography with him.
Yeah, as well as the band and
Right,
the Woodstock Festival per se. He was
Right,
the
he was the
of the
official
festival.
photographer. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he lives right down the road here in Saugerties, you know, and is a good friend. Yes, Elliot's a good man. Yeah, great guy. Yeah.
We were going to talk about the bottles, right?
The bottles and the seahorse.
Yeah.
We're rolling, man.
Well, really?
Yeah.
We're rolling?
Uh-huh.
Okay, I'll tell you about all the beer bottles under the seahorse.
Oh, good.
Nobody else knew about them but me.
Well, tell me more. This is
Really? You want to
fascinating.
hear about that?
The beer bottles under
it kept me in...
which became the elephant. And
Yeah, it actually became the Woodstock Lounge before it became the Elephant.
Yeah.
But
Tell me.
well, as a kid, I was investigating everything. You know, I was 9 years old, just moved to town in '62, and this place I had said the Seahorse was closed, and I walking around it, I looked under it, and lo and behold, I saw all these bottles, and they were empties, or they were Coca-Cola bottles, and there were also Budweiser bottles, and looking under there, there must have been 200 or 300 cases of empty bottles. And so I always had money in my pocket, and nobody knew how I was getting it, and I certainly wasn't going to tell anybody about these bottles, because it was my secret stash. So whenever I needed some extra bucks, I'd go ahead and go underneath the Seahorse and grab some bottles and take them down to the Grand Union and cash them in, and had some change. Pal around town with.
Cool.
Yeah.
Things didn't cost that much those days.
Things didn't cost that much. A couple cents actually could buy you more than you can imagine. After the first sound out in '67, Cyril Castor, which was he was one of the people that played at the first sound out. His band was called the Saints of Cyril, and he played with a gal named Krishna, who was gorgeous. She looked like she was out of one of those Breck hair commercials. And her name was Krishna, and she had a baby named Tree. And they were all there and invited me to go with them in October to Washington, D.C. to raise the Pentagon. And that's what they called it. And I said, we're going to raise the Pentagon? And he said, well, it's to stop the war in Vietnam. And I said, well, that sounds like a great idea. And I hadn't been away from home on my own before. And my dad actually said yes to Cyril, that as long as he kept his eye on me, that we could go, that I would be allowed to go. So come October, I think it was October 2nd or 1st, we went to this commune called Group 212. Now the Group 212 was a great place, just down the street from where the sound out was. And that's where we printed all the posters. And remember I was saying and talking earlier about the flying saucers that we had at the first festival and everything?
Yeah.
Well, on the poster, we had flying saucers. And it was one of the things, and there was a big silkscreen room at the Group 212, and we printed out all the posters on that. Well, anyway, we went back. It was at night. My dad drove me over to the place, and in the kitchen everyone was gathering. And my dad said goodbye, and he double-checked with Cyril that he was going to keep his eye on me, and that was fine. And there was a bus, and we all got on the bus, and we took off driving down to Washington, D.C. Okay? So we get down to this D.C. area, and we find the parking area, and the bus driver steps out, and he says that he'd be back after the march. And so we went down and started to march, and we went over the bridge towards Georgetown and out towards where the Pentagon was. And we marched until we got there, and Abby Hoffman, I believe, was there. Someone was, I think it was him, he was standing on the back of a truck, and he was handing out flowers. And I took a couple, 3 flowers, 4 flowers, and there was all these military guys, I think there was National Guard, standing there with their guns up like that and out holding them like that. And I'd say, wow, and I saw some people sticking flowers in the muzzles of the guns. And so I walk up to the one soldier. He wasn't much older than me. I was like, at that point I had turned 14, and he looked like he was about 18. He might have been 4 years older than me. And he just looked at me like, what are you doing? And I said, don't be afraid. I'm not going to do anything to you. I'm just going to tell you that you don't have to use that, and there's no reason for you to use that gun. And I put a flower in the muzzle. And he just looked at me and he cried. And I kept walking, and all of a sudden I saw these puppets that were like, they were standing on these stilts that was way up high. I mean, they were like 18 feet tall. And there was a play going on, and I guess it was, what was the name of the theater group? The Living Theater. Yeah, it was the first time I'd ever seen that. And it was pretty amazing. And that was right on the steps of the Pentagon. And so we stayed and we watched that happen. And as the day progressed, I heard that there was some trouble in certain areas, that there had been some fighting or something going on. I don't know. But I was with Cyril and everything. Everything was great. When we went back to the bus, and the bus driver was late. We didn't know where he was. He was kind of straight, and he didn't have any. He was just the bus driver. He was hired by the bus company, chartered company. And so he went out. I guess he had lunch for the day or whatever, and probably wanted to see some of the sights around Washington, D.C. But we were okay. All the people were okay. We were back on the bus. We were waiting to go back to Woodstock. And he comes on the bus, and his eyes were all teared. And he got tear gassed. He was the one person that came down there not to protest, ended up getting tear gassed. Mm-hmm. So that was interesting.
Serves him right for not participating.
We all took care of him, and we were very kind to him, and everything, and got him his act together so he could drive us. I mean, obviously he had to drive, so we needed his eyes.
Yeah,
You
it
know.
wears off after a while.
Yeah. So, but at any rate, so yeah, that was the first time, the first protest march I ever went to was in '67 when we raised the Pentagon. I thought I'd like to talk about that a little bit, and that's pretty much all I can remember.
What do you mean you raised the Pentagon? Did it
Well,
levitate?
yeah, because they actually say that we actually made the Pentagon rise up off of its foundation and come down from all of us. There were about 50,000 of us, which is quite a few people at the time. That was one of the largest events.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things I remember was that could have been the Bread and Puppet Theater, the one with the big puppets.
It was the Living Theater.
Are you sure? They
Yes.
had big puppets, yeah?
Yeah, it was. It was the Living Theater.
From Vermont, they would often come down the Bread
Yeah,
and Puppet
yeah.
Theater.
It was Garrick's parents.
Yeah.
Julian Beck.
Yeah, Julian Beck and
Yeah,
Judith
it
Melinda.
was.
Yeah.
It was the first time I'd ever seen that. And later on, years later, because in '72 I met Garrick,
Yeah.
and I related that same story to Garrick.
Kind of a chip off the old block, Garrick, huh?
Yeah, he was. He was. You want to talk about the rainbow gatherings?
Well, you could. I didn't want to skip over the Woodstock Festival.
Oh, okay. We can talk about
Go
Woodstock.
back to
Okay,
Rainbow. That
okay,
came
I remember-
afterward. That was Woodstock Nation, the Rainbow guy. After Woodstock,
Yeah.
we were the Woodstock Nation, and this is
We
one
were.
of the ways that we turned the more commercial attempt, which was Woodstock, on its head and kept up with the same spirit, but it was non-commercial and non-electric, and it was us in the mountains. Anyway, that's a whole nother story, but that you and I met at for the first time.
Yeah. I came with the Woodstock Health Angels.
Well, I can't wait to hear your version because Eric is often telling me stories that I either don't remember or remember some of, but he remembers. And so I really liked hearing about what I did back in those days in my 20s. But anyway, so here's Eric Greenberg we're talking with. And Eric has come back from Seattle, Washington, to visit his one of his favorite homes ever, and where he was raised around Woodstock, New York. So, or in Woodstock for much of his childhood. But let's get back to it. So you went to this protest after the Sound Out. This was before Woodstock Festival.
Yeah, before the big festival. That was
Yeah.
in '67.
Yeah.
And '68 we had another festival called Sound Festival.
Right, which we've
and,
talked about. Yeah.
And Julius was interviewed by Michael Lang during that festival.
Right.
And Michael decided to do it, and we got word from Bill McCord told me about the fact that it was on, and that whole summer we prepared for it and everything. We were all waiting to figure out where, in fact, it was going to be, and we didn't really find a place for it, or Lang didn't find a place for it until just weeks before the event.
So that was
Yeah.
1968, no? When Michael Lang came to the Sound Festival?
Yes, he came. Yeah, he came in
Because,
'68.
you
But
know, he was running a head shop down in Miami, and he put on a concert that year
Yes, he
with
did.
Jimi Hendrix, and it called
Yeah.
Miami Pop. And Michael wanted to highlight Jimmy at that concert, and Michael had the bucks. He was running a head shop. He had everything. You know, he was making money,
Yeah.
and so now he's. You know, had connected on his way up. From what I understand, he met Artie Kornfeld at Capitol Records, and he started spreading out the vision, getting a lot of contacts to really bring in some stars, and then he comes up to Woodstock. So here we are with Michael Lang at the Sound Out in '68.
in '68, yeah.
Yeah.
After that, the whole winter's passed and everything. And come spring in '69, Bill McCord comes up to me and says, it's going to happen. And so we spent the whole summer, as I was just saying, waiting to see where it was going to be, because maybe a month before the event, we found out where it was really going to be in Bethel, in White Lake. And so they were doing a lot of work there, getting all the prep done and
You
everything.
weren't aware of the idea that they couldn't, they had it all going in Wallkill? I mean, they couldn't do Woodstock.
They were
couldn't
denied
do
the
Sawgrass.
permits. The permits got pulled.
But they had the stage half up already.
Oh, did they?
And they had a
Yeah.
lot of
Yeah,
stuff arriving there
yeah.
before the town busted them. I mean, they kind of pulled, you know, after Woodstock said no, and Saugerty said no, not with my daughter, not in my backyard, you know, with all the hippies and the drugs and the music and all that stuff they didn't like. They found Wallkill, but they had, you know, sweet talk the town board in Wallkill into this country festival, family friendly and all that. But when the town started seeing who was really at that festival, and it was not the vibe that they thought it was going to be, they broke the contract and kicked them out and all that stuff. And then they had to find somewhere real quick because it was like 5 weeks before the festival, and they miraculously found Bethel. That's a whole other story we have told and we can tell again sometime. So what's next?
Well, I'm going to segue just a little bit,
Yeah.
and tell you a story that a friend of mine, a really good friend of mine, told me about flying into the festival with Richie Havens, which I thought maybe you might be interested in. They took off, this is the day of the festival, and it was a Friday, and they took off from Grossinger's, and my friend Bob,
Resort, yeah.
my friend Bob Brainin, with a couple other security people, and Richie Havens, were in the helicopter coming up, and just a little side story here about Richie. You know, when he first started playing guitar, you know, you have to learn somewhere, and Bob actually taught Richie how to do the tuning that he plays in, and how to actually thumb the guitar so he could, because he had a fantastic voice and everything, but he wasn't the strongest on the guitar. So Bob actually showed him the tuning on the guitar that way and how to play it. And so they were tight and they knew each other very well, hence they were in the helicopter together. And they looked down, and about a mile or two away, they could see all these different colors all spread out on the land. It was like reds and greens and blues and yellows and just little dots. And they go, "What is that? What is that?" And the pilot looks back and he says, "Those are people." He says, "People?" And they look and they're getting closer, and it's just the hugest crowd that they ever saw. And Havens looks down. Hendrix, that's another story. But
Well, they were the bookends. One began the festival, one ended it.
they were the bookends. But at any rate, Havens looks down and goes, "I can't play to that many people. That's crazy. I can't do that." And Bob looks at him and goes, "Well, Richie, you know, you've been working your whole life just to do this, just to play to this." And he said, "You know, you're right." And as Bob tells it, the helicopter lands, and they walk up by the stage, and I think it was Lang that walked up to him and said, "Oh God, you're here, you're here. You got to come on and play. You're going to open up the show." And Richie goes, "What? I can't open up. We even open up the show." And there was already he already had and one of his drummers was already on the stage. I forget his name right now, but he was warming up and everything. And of course, well, you know the rest of the story. Richie opens up the show with Freedom.
Right, which is an improvisation.
It was an improvisation, and he got so many encores. And the reason was he stayed on is because they didn't have anyone to follow up with yet.
Right.
They didn't have the next band to come on yet, and so he played until he actually ran out of material, and then he started making things up.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, but finally, I guess the Swami. Sachinananda got up and led the opening ceremony, and then Sweetwater came on and whatever. And I was already in the crowd by then. My dad had driven me into the festival, and we actually drove right into the festival. But so many people were sitting on the car that he popped a wheel bearing in the car, and it was making this thud sound. My dad said it's nothing serious, which is good. So we got out of the car and walked up to the main area that was above the festival by where the bulletin board was. And we both agreed that on Monday morning, at the end of the show, he would come and pick me up there. So that's where we would meet. And he let me be on my own, 15 years old, walking through the Woodstock Festival. And I made my way down towards the front stage, and Richie was playing, and the song Freedom, and I saw him do all those ovations and everything, and then we all ommed and chanted with Sachinananda, and that was very cool. And I found myself right by where the boom was doing all the video for the festival, and right to the left of it was a group of people, and we were sitting down, and all of a sudden it looked like it was going to rain, and the wind kicked up, and I mean, it really kicked up. And big drops of water were coming down, and all of a sudden I noticed that this huge tarp, plastic tarp, was coming over my head, and someone said, "Grab the edge of the tarp, kid." And I did, and I put it under my butt, and the wind came up and blew it up into a huge, like almost like a dome. And there underneath that was about 60 people. And all the rain was coming down on it, and we were dry, sitting underneath this plastic bubble, and everyone was chanting, "No rain, no rain, no rain," and saying, "Get off the towers because the rain's going to make them unstable and you're going to knock them over." So everyone was on the sound towers, had to climb down off the towers.
This was already Friday when Richie had by. Wasn't it later the next day?
It was. I think it was Saturday.
Yeah,
but
yeah, you skipped a day there,
I'm skipping a
that's
day.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, I'm skipping
I
a
just wanted
day.
to straighten it out. That didn't
But-
happen right then and there.
Yeah, because the first day on Friday, I just spent really investigating, walking around the whole place.
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
okay.
but I did find myself back again the next day where I watched the show by the video. Thank you very much for reminding
That's all
me.
right.
But yeah, the first day, I'll get back to that. The first day I was actually walking around. I went through the Bethel Woods, where Groovy Way and the Highway and this way and that way and all that beautiful stuff. And I walk out through the other end, and that's where the hog farm kitchen was. And as I walked even further out and towards where the parking lot was, I ran across a group of people I knew from my school. It was Rudy Hopkins and a bunch of the kids from my school. And what were they doing? But they were barbecuing and grilling steak. And it wasn't just any steak, it was like porterhouse steaks. And he offered me one. So yeah, the Friday, no one said there was no food at the Woodstock Festival. I had steak there, okay, and really good steak on Friday night at the Woodstock Festival.
Yeah.
And I slept that night. Remember Marshall? Was talking about Marshall, and he got us all going for the Woodstock for the first festival at Sound Out. Well, he was the guy that said, "Anyone want to work for the summer?" Well, he had a psychedelic school bus, and he was parked right next to the hog farm bus that was the further bus. And he was parked there, and he let me sleep underneath his bus. I met, and he was with his girlfriend, Diane, who I knew. And so we all had a kind of a good reunion there. And I slept underneath the bus, and then Saturday morning, I made my way back to the main field, you know, and going through the wavy, you know, all the Groovy Way and all this, all the way back through that again.
Stop by the hog farm at all?
I did have breakfast at the hog farm on my way back, at the hog farm kitchen. I did stop there, but I didn't hang out there, okay? And so we're there under this bubble later on in the day, and the rain is coming down, and it's just crazy rain, and everyone's smoking pot. You know, everyone's like, you know, getting, and the whole thing is filling up with pot smoke. And there's no place for it to go. And so this is our environment for the next like 45 minutes. This is our environment for the next 45 minutes is like we're breathing in pot smoke, right? And so, oh my God.
You weren't much of a pot smoker as far as I remember. You weren't much into pot smoking.
I had no choice.
Yeah, so you feel like you got a buzz.
Well, I kind of got a buzz on, but so did about 400,000 other people,
Yeah.
all at the same time.
Yeah.
And by the time the rain had cleared, we were in the best mood you can imagine.
Yeah.
And we just kind of floated our way all around the place. But during that time, there was this really good-looking, pretty-looking girl that was sitting next to me, and I was looking at her, and she was looking at me, and we walked hand in hand back towards her tent. But things weren't as she, you know, she wasn't ready to, like, you know, we weren't ready to like tie the knot with each other, you know, get it together or anything like that. She had other things that she had to do, but she said to me without a doubt that later on that night I should come and meet her at her tent. And so I look forward to that the whole day. And I wandered around, and I don't remember everything that I did that day. I ran into some old friends, some people that were like, I guess they must have been doing some of that brown acid or something, because they saw me, and they were really good friends, and we had a hug, and they said, gotta go, gotta go, gotta go, and things like that, you know. And I ran into TP Bob Selby, and he gave me directions and showed me the lay of the land as he had explored the place. I had met Bob about a year before at the Elephant. And so I ran into quite a few people I knew, and we hung out and everything, and I'm just killing time because I can't wait to get back to that tent. So come about 10 o'clock at night, which is when she said to come by, there she was, and she was waiting for me, you know, and I crawled in the tent and everything, and it started to pour again. And it's just pouring, and we're kind of like cuddling and everything and getting ready to get it on and everything.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden from the stage you hear, "Ladies and gentlemen, Janis Joplin," right?
Ah.
And all of a sudden she screams, she jumps up from underneath me, knocks the tent down, all this cold water comes flowing down on top of me. She's running out bare-ass naked, you know, and saying, and the first words out of Janis's mouth was, "I hope everyone's warm and comfortable out there." And I went, "Oh no." Anyway.
Yeah, you win some, you lose some.
You win some, you lose some. That's right. That's right. And it just could not seem to get the magic back. So, you know, when in Rome, do the Romans do. So I just started enjoying listening to the music and what have you. And that night passed.
Yeah.
Well,
imagine you enjoyed that, right?
Yeah, I had a wonderful evening, and you know, nothing bad happened. You know, nothing bad to be said. But you know, lost opportunity, whatever. And I did get a wet, cold shower out of the deal.
Yeah.
And next morning, I get up.
Yeah.
And there's Wavy Gravy's on the stage, Hugh Romney, and he's talking about breakfast in bed for 400,000 people. And I'm going, "Oh no!" She looks at me, she says, "What do you mean, oh no?" And I said, "I gotta go." And I got up and she said, "Why?" And I said, "Well, they're gonna need help at the kitchen." You know? So I ran back through the woods and got into the kitchen, and everyone's like getting together because they know they're about to have an onslaught of people, right? And I find myself right in the center. It's like a wheel. It's covered like, so this was kind of like a dome-shaped kitchen. And it had a hexagon kind of dome shape, and I'm right in the middle of it with a group of people, and there were about 60 of us inside the kitchen, and there was food that kept coming in, and we kept preparing it for an outer layer of people, another circle that was around our circle, that was within the circle that was the kitchen, that was taking the prep food that we had sent to them, and they were doing further steps to it. And by the time it got to the service area, which was the perimeter of the kitchen, there was a full meal was ready with
was
rice.
This the hog farm?
Yeah,
kitchen?
hog farm with rice and vegetables and granola cups and everything. Everyone had a thing that they did.
Rice,
and
vegetables, and granola.
we were serving granola cups, and rice and vegetables. You know, and there was tamari and all these different sauces people could put on it and everything. And at one point, there's so many people showing up, we were doing at least 100 meals per minute. We were handing out, and this went on for a few hours. Okay, and at one point, Wavy Gravy came by and he says, "We fed over 17,000 people so far." You know, because he headed it up, and it went on for over an hour or two more than that. And finally it began to die down a little bit. And I took a deep breath, and I went back out, and it was getting towards night, and I heard all this drumming going from the Bethel Woods. And so I'm making my way in and finding out what's going on in the Bethel Woods, you know, and here's this crazy guy on this drum just pounding away, and all these women are dancing silhouettes with no clothes on, you know, all around him and stuff. I said, "This guy's got something going."
I'll bet you I know who that was.
That was Fantuzzi.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the first time I ever seen Fantuzzi. And I walk up, and he has this biggest smile on his face, you know, because he knows what's going on, and I see what's going on. And this girl grabs my hand and pulls me down next to her and everything. And so we start rolling around a little bit and then getting up and dancing and stuff like that. And the night goes on and on and on. And finally, the sun starts coming up, and her boyfriend comes back. And he looks at me, and I look at him, and I go, oh no, you know. And she's got this big smile, and we all three hug, and he says, "Oh, everything's cool, man. Don't worry about a thing, you know, no problems." And I said, "Oh, cool, no problems," right? And that's the way the whole festival was.
Well, at least Fantuzzi left somebody for you. I mean,
yeah. Well, I remember when he used to be at Zubin's. Well, that's another story. But we have a lot of stories. Fantuzzi and I have a lot of stories. We used to swap poetry and other things.
Yeah, I got a lot of footage of them.
Other people.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, so come Sunday night, you know, all this transpired, and it became Sunday morning, and went through the day, and everything was cool. I remember going swimming in the pond. I remember going out and taking most of my clothes off, and sliding in the mud, and then cleaning myself off in the pond and putting my clothes back on. And the place turned into like a hell, but we played in it. We sang and danced. I mean, it was wonderful for all of us. You know, there was 3 births and 2 deaths one kid that got run over by a tractor, another guy that OD'd, I guess, or something happened. But there was no violence there. And come Monday morning, I wake up to hear the sound of the Star Spangled Banner and Jimi Hendrix playing. And I made my way up towards and I was kind of tired, but I made my way up through the crowd, which had pretty much, there were a lot of people had left at that point. And I made my way up towards the bulletin board where I said I was going to meet my dad. And sure enough, he was waiting for me, And he said, well, how'd you make out? And I said, well, some things we talk about, Dad, and some things... And he said, okay, I won't push it, right?
How old were you?
I was 15,
okay.
right? So there were certain things I wasn't going to tell my dad I did. And, but at any rate, we walked, and it took a while to get back to the car. And in the meantime, while we were walking, I said, so thank you very much for coming here and picking me up. How did you get here? He says, I just drove. I said, well, how did you drive here? You can't drive here. I heard that they closed the thruway down. They closed the thruway down. This is a disaster area. He said, I've driven here every day for the last 3 days, in and out.
Yeah, the back way.
Yeah, the back way.
Yeah.
He said, I went through cornfields. I went through this and that.
Oh, that
all I had to do was show my press pass. And he got through these special ways. But he says, well, that problem I said with the wheel bearing, he said, it's gotten worse. And I think we can make it home. I'm not sure, but I think we can make it home. Right? And so we get into the car, and we go the back way, and then we hear this thud, 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 thud every time the wheel turned around. He says, don't worry about that. Once we pick up speed, I get on the main road, we get up to 50, 60 miles an hour, the thud goes away. And he was right. No, my father was driving.
Oh, your father was driving.
He said, don't worry about it.
Okay.
The thud goes away once I get up to speed.
Yeah.
And he was right. We got up to speed, and there was no thud. But when we pulled up to Route 28 and up 375 and we were going up Mill Hill Road, the thud came back because we had to go slow again.
Right.
And it was really loud this time, and people were actually looking at us. And I was embarrassed, and I kind of ducked down, inside the car because I didn't want anyone to see me in this car. It was making all this racket. And we pulled into 66 Rock City Road into the driveway, and the wheel seized. Right as we pulled into the driveway, it seized. But we weren't all the way into the driveway. We still had our ass end out onto the street. And so he gunned it and made the car slide into the driveway. And that's how we got home from the Woodstock Festival.
Just in the nick. But
Yeah.
let's go back to that. What was going through your mind when, if anything, you must have been pretty tired, when Hendrix was playing the Star Spangled Banner?
I thought it was very patriotic. No, I thought it was very cool. He's playing this patriotic song in such a cool way I'd never heard before. And I said, that's our anthem. That's our version of our anthem. That's our song.
Was there any other imagery that maybe would be going through based on the version of the way he treated that song?
What I was thinking about was this is our song. It made me feel proud. It gave me a feeling of pride because I was patriotic. We went and we protested against the war. We did all these things, and it was out of patriotism that we did it, not out of we want to tear our country apart. We want to build our country up and have it be just and right, and
Yeah, but a lot of people, the establishment, really didn't like that version. They thought that was very unpatriotic, where we thought it was the best thing, the expression of that era that you could practically imagine.
Absolutely, and the right wing also thought that rock and roll was music from hell.
Right, but the Star Spangled Banner was. That was a big difference between those who were blindly patriotic no matter what, and those who, like a lot of us, were educated enough. This may have been the first generation of Americans that were educated enough to question authority, to be, quote, hip to what was really going on.
Founding fathers said question authority. Founding fathers said form militias. Founding fathers said it's our right to overthrow the government if the government goes off track.
So where has this gone since then? What happened? Look at us today. Have we made any progress? Did Woodstock?
You want to bring this into contemporary times and talk about Donald Trump?
Let's see. No, I don't want to talk about Donald Trump
Okay,
necessarily.
thank God.
No, anything but that.
Thank you.
But in general, was the 60s fail? Did we?
No, the 60s was nothing more than a foundation for what we've built everything else upon. The environmental movement, all the different movements, women's rights, all the different movements, all the different progress that we've made socially stem from the 60s. And, you know, the civil rights movement, women's rights, as I said, and the type of music we listen to, our fashion, everything.
Awareness of
of
the government. I mean, Bob Dylan defined hip as being totally aware. Now, of course, nobody's totally aware, but it was like
the times they are changing, you know. And if what was later last will now be first, you know, the times they are changing. Sons and your fathers, you know, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. You know, Bob Dylan, yeah, but you know that the '60s was the foundation for where we are right now. If not for the '60s, who knows where we would be? John Birchers might have taken over.
Well, some foundation were just about ready to prove that humanity is so dumb it's going to price itself out of into extinction.
We have a choice, don't we? We can go one or two ways. We can do that, or we've got the technology now with renewable energy to totally replace fossil fuels and do it without feeling much pain. You know, the only ones going to feel the pain are the people that have been supplying the fossil fuels. You know, they won't have their jobs anymore. The people that will be mining coal are going to have to learn new technology jobs.
Yeah, I see now in New York State, they're putting solar panels. A lot of places around the country
Sure
are
they
putting
are.
solar, but you know, Rockefeller or wherever the energy companies, they're all still going to be making the money. And the solar panels that they're enticing everybody to put on their roof wherever they fit, you're still gonna you'll minimize the amount of fossil fuels that you use because of that, but you're always gonna have that bill, that big bill that you have to pay for the panels to the electric company until you actually buy them and own them.
Well, first of all, you don't buy the modules from the electric company. You buy it from solar installers.
Right.
Okay, who buy it from manufacturers that are not necessarily
you're
part of.
always going to be paying that bill for the electricity,
Yes, you are.
as opposed to our system where we have the backup.
Yeah, it's never going to be for free. But here's the deal about solar and about hydro and everything.
Yeah.
Once you pay for the installation and the materials, the warranties on these systems go on for 20, 30 years beyond
Right.
after you've paid for it. So it
Right.
keeps paying back and paying back and paying back. You make money on it.
Yeah, but you're always paying, the way they're installing it now, you always have an electric bill, and if you have...
That's if you lease. That's if
right,
you're
that's
leasing.
what they're doing. That's what they're selling.
That's what
to
some
everybody.
people are doing. I'm
Lots of
totally,
people.
yeah, well, it's much better to own your power than to rent it,
Right,
please.
that's
Thank
what I'm
you.
saying,
You
yeah,
know.
and to have your own backup system.
Yes,
They won't
exactly.
even let you, as far as I understand, put in a backup system, a battery backup system on all these leasing.
Well, they won't. No, not in the leasing. No, definitely not, because
Or even when you buy
they're
those
making their
panels.
money on the production. They're making money off of your roof when you lease from them. They actually charge you a little bit more than the power company, electric company charges you.
Okay, yeah.
You know, like I said, if you can finance it, or you have cash and you can buy it outright. I was selling solar 10 years ago. It was $10 per watt installed. Now it's down to $250 to $350 a watt
Right.
installed.
And it's
Okay.
more efficient, the panels
And, yeah,
themselves. And the
well, a little bit more
technology.
efficient. We've
Yeah,
made some
almost
progress
twice.
that
Yeah.
way. But the bottom line is that people don't want to stop making that money. They keep wanting to take the oil and the coal out of the ground. And we have to leave it in the ground because we're already up to over 400 parts per million in terms of our carbon.
Right.
Okay, back pre-industrial, we were at 280
Right.
parts per million. Okay,
Right.
and for 10,000 years, the climate was pretty stable. Okay, and they know this because of ice cores that they've taken and what have you. That how many parts per billion the carbon was. It doesn't seem like very much, but it makes a huge difference because the last time it was over 400 parts per million was about 250,000 years ago, and it was tropical up in the Arctic.
Mm-hmm.
And that happened. It took thousands of years for that to occur,
Yeah.
and it's occurring now overnight.
Right. So what do you think?
It's the biggest challenge that's ever met the planet, and we're the cause of it.
Right. And are we reaching a point of no return?
We're reaching a point where it's totally unsustainable, and we know that, and we've reached some tipping points, but it's not at the point of no return. We're 1 degree above right now where we were Celsius, back pre-industrial. And if we stop right now, just like a car on ice, we're going to slide to 1.5 degrees if we stop right now.
Yeah.
Okay, if we stop by the 2030s and go zero, by then we're going to go up to a minimum of 2 degrees and above pre-industrial Celsius, which is like 6 degrees right around Fahrenheit, above. So basically, if you look at it right now, we don't know what tipping points in terms of the methane that's underneath the ocean that's frozen is going to be released. And all the tipping points that we're crossing, we don't have a clue about. They say that we should be okay at 2 degrees, but 1.5, what 1 degree already has made a big change. Grazing areas and things like that. Wine country has moved north, from California up to Washington State now.
Yeah.
Things are changing. We're experiencing climate change. The seas are rising. The tidal surges from the storms are now inundating Southern California, Southern Florida. So
things are going to change.
Things are happening right now.
Changing, right.
Yeah,
We've
so
all been hearing
it's
about
not
that.
some hoax that was invented by the Chinese. Believe me.
Right.
Okay, we're living it, and unless we change, this is the 6th great extinction.
Do you think there's any chance that we can transform our thinking to the extent that the bottom line is not the accumulation of wealth, which it has been ever since the Enlightenment age of John Locke and John Stuart Mill? They had a very strong influence on our founders. This was a time where everything became more material, where money became a big thing, where the accumulation of wealth became the highest game. I think it's become like the religion or the most important thing to people. How can we ever shift to that, to what the native people and even what the hippies were saying, a bottom line which consists on making decisions based on how it will affect the welfare of the future generations?
Yeah, exactly what I was about to say.
Okay.
And thank you very much for putting it, because actually the way you said it was better than what I was going to.
Oh, I say it every day to all our tourists.
All
I
right,
have
well,
to
there you
bring
go.
the 60s
Yeah.
into the now,
Yeah.
and make people feel part of the real historic process that we're
Absolutely.
going through, and knowing that our creation can be creative, can help make the change. So that's what it's all about to me. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I also would like to make that another comment.
All right.
And that is that back in the day when we were forming this country with the founding fathers and the accumulation of wealth and what have you, you could see that. And there was material things that people needed. They needed shelter, and they needed certain things. They needed a couple cows, and they needed this, and they needed, but there were only 1 billion people on the planet back then. Okay, and it was sustainable. We had no idea what we were doing. When we found oil, when we discovered oil, we had no idea that it could warm the planet. We had no idea. The more cars, the better. 2 cars in every garage.
Right.
Thank you. Build the highway system out. Do the whole thing, because it was nothing but gravy. It was then we got into the post-war in the 50s. The best time of our economy. Eisenhower, built the highway system up, and believe it or not, the top tax tier was 90% back then, but no one wants to talk about that. That's
Right.
Republican.
Yeah.
But at any rate, it only began to occur to us in the last 30 or 40 years that we're damaging our environment that way.
Right.
And because I remember as a kid driving through Jersey and smelling the dirt in the air and the
fumes,
refineries. And
pollution.
my dad said, they're going to build they just passed a Clean Air Act. And he said they're going to build the smokestacks higher, so it goes up into the atmosphere and not down towards the ground. Because once it goes in the atmosphere, it dissipates, because the atmosphere is so huge.
Yeah.
And then I remember times when I was up in Woodstock, this is in the 60s, and the most beautiful sunsets that you can imagine.
Pollution.
Fiery reds, and
Right.
yellows and oranges
Smog,
and everything. And I look at my dad and he says, that's from pollution.
Yeah.
And I said, oh. And at that point, Pete Seeger started doing the Clearwater, okay, and cleaning up the Hudson and stuff. And we knew Pete all the time because he came and played at the Espresso, and we know Pete pretty well, and Peter Yarrow and all those folks, the old folkies, used to come from town. And that was way before the festival. These guys were active.
Yeah.
And his idea was to clean up the Hudson, started the Clearwater. And a lot of people know this story, but it was my first involvement in environmental stuff.
Yeah, and it ended up, or it didn't end yet, but we finally always illustrate the idea of what must be done of people power through the Clearwater, the sloop that Pete and company put on the river, and educated people about the river, the history of it, and General Electric, which polluted the river with the PCBs, and we went up against the biggest corporation in the world, they say, General Electric, and we won. I just read the most recent article about it was a $2 billion lawsuit, basically, or what GE has now put into trying to clean up the river, because several nonprofits and a lot of people were educated to actually push our Congress people to represent us in this case and make General Electric step up to the plate and start cleaning the river. But the problem with that is General Electric just wanted to step back and say, we've got all the hot spots, and we're saying no, the measurements have been
just
taken.
found another one.
There's plenty of just
more.
move the equipment if you have to, but there's a lot of nothing more to clean up. And not only the Hudson, but just about every other river and lake.
Can I segue a little bit?
Go right ahead.
Make a comment. Don McLean, which was one of the first, he was one of the first captains of the Clearwater, okay, was in his songwriting inspired the founders of Greenpeace. And if it wasn't for Seeger and a lot of the stuff that he did with McLean and everything, we might not have Greenpeace today, which is definitely one of the major caretakers of the planet and pointing out these hot spots.
Yeah, kind of reminds me of the mouse that roared in Australia, our sister village in Australia. They Nimbin, it kind of sounds like not in my backyard, Nimbin, but they're extremely environmental, and once they recycled the town, when they had their 3 Aquarius festivals, and the third one was a lifestyle festival instead of a rock festival, that recycled this town.
Kind of like the Rainbow Gathering.
They noticed that, and the Aboriginals called their attention to the idea that the last of the big scrub, the last rainforest of its kind on the planet, was being cut down. The only ones in this bankrupt town that had really work were the loggers, and they were assigned to cut down this rainforest, which the Aboriginal says, don't let him cut it down, mate. That's going to ruin all our bush tucker. And the bush tucker was the food they've been eating for 60,000 years. And that's why we get our herbs for healing. And they went to the students because this was the first time the white students in the civil rights movement down there in Australia, just like what was happening here, invited the blacks and tried to help them. And 1,000 of them showed up. And not only did they want to respect the Aboriginals' wishes, because they've been eating and healing with these herbs and eating this food for 60,000 years, they buried their dead, they found their totems in that rainforest, and they had their excuses for not wanting to cut it down. And the students realized this could kill some million species around the world. And the people who founded the rainforest movement around the world, and from what I understand, the people who founded Greenpeace with this, were at those protests. So it's amazing what like Margaret Mead said, and this is really a very important point to make. I'm sure most of you have heard, I'll try to phrase it, never doubt what a small group of thoughtful, dedicated individuals could do to save the world. Indeed, it's the only ones that ever have. So, yeah, basically, but I'm just referring to the mouse that roared, that people power does exist, that you can get General Electric to back off. And
you certainly can.
We actually have power to
if we don't use their products, they're not relevant anymore. So that's the other aspect. If we don't use their power, then they lose their relevancy.
Yeah, well, that's a tough one to get everyone to back up, to really protest that.
Well, once we have something to replace it with, such as the renewable energy,
right,
then they don't have we take their power from them, and we then assume the power.
Right. Creating the alternative, and things like planting lots of trees because they'll inhale the carbon.
We have to do sequestering.
They'll exhale the oxygen.
Absolutely.
Lots of trees. Just different solutions.
But nothing's as powerful as an idea whose time has come, and this has come. To catch a phrase, and like I was saying earlier, dropping the pebble into the pond. And as the waves come out, it creates larger and larger concentric circles that affect greater and greater masses.
Well, I guess with that thought, I mean, we've taken this all the way from Woodstock to Woodstock Nation, which was like a state of mind beyond the festival, that places like Nimbin, Australia, things like the Rainbow Gathering. Oh, we didn't talk much about that one. These were Woodstock Nation. This was a concept, a state of mind around the world. It wasn't the commercial aspect. It was the peace and the stopping of the wars and the respect for all life and the wish. To me, a hippie, I tell my tourists, to me, what I thought a hippie was and still do was one who wanted to be more closely connected to the earth. And I mean, as a being on a planet.
Not necessarily
space.
smelling like it?
Huh?
Not necessarily having to smell like it.
Hippies didn't smell so bad. I jumped in a river a few days and everything. Some did, and there were the ones that want to look like them, and those are the ones that and act like them, but really weren't. I mean, there's always.
I was
that.
just making a joke.
I know, but hippies aren't all necessarily dirty.
Well, I guess that's where that interview ends, kind of abruptly. That was Eric Greenberg being interviewed by our own Nathan Koenig from the Woodstock Museum.